Let's bring in our next guest. And I'll be honest here, he's one of my real intellectual heroes. He's a classicist, an author, a historian, a farmer, and a political commentator, and he brings the sweep of thousands of years of history to bear in analyzing America's present crisis. Victor Davis Hanson, welcome to the show. Now, I want to start with a really provocative article you published recently called The Biden 10-Step Plan for Global Chaos, and you list all the ways in which the world seems to be getting more chaotic, from Israel's enemies all turning against her at once, to Macron cozying up to China, to talk of ditching the dollar as a world currency. What's going on, Victor Davis Hanson, and how much of this is deliberate?
Hard to know how much is deliberate, but it's part of a hard left progressive agenda that we've had in the United States the last 2 years, and we've never had it. So when countries look at the United States as an example of stability, they see rampant crime in our cities, they see hyperinflation, they see a non-existent border, they look at Afghanistan, and then they look at the president and they think, what is he doing about this? And they find somebody who's not in control of fully of his cognitive faculties. And then in addition to that, they look at actual examples. The Anchorage summit with the Chinese in March of 2021, where we were humiliated. The misinformation about a Chinese balloon with impunity spied the entire length of the continental United States. As I said, the withdrawal of Afghanistan, the turnover of $50 billion of equipment to the terrorist Taliban. In Ukraine, the idea that Biden said, if they have a minor offensive, we won't object. Or if Vladimir Putin is going to attack us with cyber warfare, would he please take off his hit list hospitals? And on and on and on.
Yeah.
And so our neutrals say, you know what, it's safer not to be aligned with the United States. Our allies are in perplexity and our enemies are on the move.
And just, really on the subject of American weakness, I have to get your reaction to this. Have a listen to this.
Do you support the military adopting that EV fleet by 2030?
I do, and I think we can get there as well. And I do think that reducing our reliance on the volatility of globally traded fossil fuels, where we know that global events such as the war in Ukraine can jack up prices for people back home, it does not contribute to energy security.
Now, that was Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm saying that she wants an all-electric military vehicle fleet by 2030. Now, you're a student of military history and tactics. Does the flow of battle wait for forces to charge their tanks overnight?
No, they don't. It's highly ironic because by 2019, the United States, for the first time in its history, since the 1940s, was completely self-sufficient in natural. We were the world's largest natural gas producer, largest oil producer, third largest coal producer. And what did this administration do? It immediately canceled the Keystone Pipeline. It jawboned frackers and horizontal drillers to the extent they couldn't get financing. They put the ANWR Strategic Reserve off limits. They canceled all new federal natural gas and oil leases. And the result was we were projected to go up to 16, 17 million barrels, and we stagnated at 12. And now we have taken 40% of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, where we beg in succession the Russians, the Iranians, the Venezuelans, and the Saudis to pump more oil, all from a position of weakness. So the problem is not EV, or we have the fuel, and we have enough fuel to transition to alternate energy over the next half century. But we should not endanger the security of the United States by deliberately crippling our supplies of oil and gas.
Well, you could say exactly the same thing is happening right now in Australia, and I think a lot of our viewers here are going to identify with exactly what you're saying. And one of the things that you also talk about a lot is how America is in the middle of a war against merit, a silent socialist revolution. And again, I think some people in Australia are going to relate. But can you talk about that a bit more and give viewers some examples of what's happening really in the United States as it just moves harder and harder to this woke progressive left?
Well, in 2021, we had a Jacobin left-wing revolution where, under the cloak of good old Joe Biden from Scranton, the left used him to get elected and played on the unpopularity of Donald Trump, et cetera, et cetera. And the result was we've never been in a situation in my lifetime, and I'm 69, where every single issue that this agenda has manifested, the border, crime, racial relations, foreign policy, the economy has no support. Every one of these issues polls negatively by a large margin for the Biden administration. But they feel they can push the agenda through institutional control, social media, traditional print media, the network news, PBS, NPR, corporate boardroom, Disney, Nike, professional sports, Hollywood, etc. So we're in the midst of this crazy, and it's a Western malaise, but it starts here in the United States, where it can encompass, if you want to take a loan and you've got a good credit rating, a bureaucratic edict says that those who pay back their loans promptly shall pay higher interest, and those who are of dubious credit worthiness shall have less interest. If you're in California and you have a power bill, now you're going to pay a surcharge on top of it based not on the power you use, but on how much money you make, penalizing those who are successful. The same thing with our college admissions. We're now going into entirely repertory race-based admissions. Where I work at the university, 22% of the incoming class is so-called white, even though it makes up 67% of the population. And to achieve that, they had to destroy the merit-based SAT scores, which are now optional. But they will not release the scores of those who were admitted that chose that option, but they will release, and they're quite proud, that 60% of those who chose to take the SAT and got a perfect score, which is the 99.9 percentile, 60% of them were rejected by Stanford. They were very proud of that fact.
And I mean, this is California we're talking about. And California, used to embody the American dream. It was where everything was happening. It was the big sort of, engine of American creativity. But this seems to have turned from a dream into a nightmare. What is it that people, outside of California and outside of America should be watching out for? What are the signs that this happens? How does this happen? What's it like? Things like illegal immigration. We talk a lot about that on the program, but how does that manifest itself, around where you live, for example?
Well, I'm at ground zero of illegal immigration. What that means, to be candid, if I walk a mile outside my home or even on my farm, I will find trash every night, where people who come across the border, they live 3 to 4 to 5 families per farmhouse, and they have no trash pickup. They throw trash all over. We have an epidemic of drunk driving and people leaving the scene of the accident. Our social facilities, whether that's kidney dialysis kidneys or the emergency room, are just swamped by people who have come. 6.5 million people have entered the United States. They've had no history of health care. They're from the southern provinces, the states of Mexico. They have enormous health, education, food, housing needs, and they're just dumped on communities, and they don't have the resources. And what I am saying to you is not from an old white guy. I'm just echoing what most of my Mexican-American 3rd and 4th generation families feel. They feel like they are being singled out because of their heritage to be the front line to incorporate or assimilate or to handle these influxes. They're not happy about it.